when and how did you first hear about Motown and Stax label?
Well, with Motown and Stax label, the first time I was aware of them was when I heard Mary Wells. You know, I heard Mary Wells and the stuff she was doing, and it just sounds so different type of beat that I kind of got turned on to that. And then later on, we were already the Vibrations before the Temptations ever came out. So that came about a little later. Smokey, I met Smokey Robinson actually before I met the Temptations. And then when they came out, when Smokey was writing a lot of stuff with the guy that started Barry Gordy. You know, he was writing a lot of stuff for Barry Gordy. But they worked at Chess Records for a while too, until they changed over and they went into their own thing. Barry Gordy pulled Smokey in with him. And so when I went to Motown, actually when I wrote the songs like the storm warning songs and the stuff for the volcanoes, Weldon McDougall took me to Motown because we did some of the tracks at Motown for the volcanoes who became the Tramps. See, so that's how I met them. And then, you know, we met the Temptations when they came out and met Paul and all of them. You know, Paul, I was closer to Paul than I was to the rest of them. He was just a real friendly guy. And at first they were on shows with us. But then as they started getting the hits that they did, then they decided to do the Motown thing, you know, the Motown shows. So we wasn't on the shows with them then, but they were a great bunch of guys. They did a dance step called a Temptation Walk, which was actually the sloop dance. So it was our step, but they did it and named it the Temptation Walk. So we were that close, you know.
All right.
So that's how I ran into them.
And was the Stax label as important as Motown was for soul music?
To me, I think it was. Motown was actually a different brand of music. The Stax and Bolt stuff was more soulful than the Motown stuff. The Motown stuff was more pop, more of a. It was more into the everyday people thing, whereas the Stax Bolt stuff was more gut bucket, more down to earth. You know, it was a little bit more soulful than the Motown thing. But I think both of them were very important as far as the independent record labels. Kenny Gammell's record label, which was Philadelphia International, they copied the Motown thing to try to start their record company. That's how important Motown was. And so did Stax. But the Stax had more of a southern gospel type feeling, the soul feeling, than the Motown thing. Motown was like the big city type of thing. So that's how that.
Do you think artists had good chances to make a career outside of these big labels?
Well, back then you could, because there was more independent labels and there was more smaller labels, and there was more mom and pop record stores, you know, and you could go in and talk to a disc jockey, you know, or you could kind of get into the record company easier then than you can now. Everything right now is so all the big companies have kind of bought up all the small companies, and then they spend so much money trying to get the records promoted, and most of the time it's going out over the internet and stuff like this, and you're not making that money, and it's kind of a different type of business now than it was then. You could go into a record company, a publishing house, and sing a song, you know, and the guy would just sit there and say whether he wanted it or not. But it's hard to try to do that now in the record industry because it's kind of hard to get your foot in the door. But back then it was a little easier.
All right. Would you say soul music still is an underground genre or not?
I would say it is. I would say it is to an extent. The soul music type of thing morphed into hip hop and rap and that type of thing. And then you find that it's coming back sort of with not as much soul, but sort of with the Bruno Mars type of thing, and some of the white artists copying that style and singing to that style. But the real rhythm and blues is kind of underground almost totally now. You know, most of the stuff that you're hearing on soul music is stuff that was recorded a long time ago, and either they're covering it, or either they playing the songs that were played back then in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. But that rap and all that stuff is just taking over everything, especially hip hop, or either the pop and the country is also in there. But it's not the same as far as soul music is concerned. Not to me, you know.
Would you consider is someone like Beyonce? Is she a soul singer or is she pop?
Well, Beyonce is more of she's more of a pop artist now. The stuff she's singing is more it's more a mixture of up tempo. It might be it has some facets of rhythm and blues in it, but it's more digital, more polished, you know, to me.
What do you think? What changed for African American musicians since the success of Motown and Stax?
Well, for one thing, the thing that I think now is, it's like I just said, is digital music. It's a lot of that stuff is not being played by musicians. It's being played by digital pianos and computerized music and this type of thing. So it's a lot of musicians are going into jazz or something like that, you know, because they've digitized everything, you know. A few of them are still around that are pretty good, you know. But that to me seems to be the main change, is that it's hard to find a live musician anymore. You know, they want to hear, a lot of times they don't want to hear live musicians. They want to hear all of that digitized stuff so they don't have to pay as many musicians as they would with the live musicians. But, you know.
Money is the music killer.
Money is the thing, you know, and then the radio stations has got everything tied up to where they only want to play certain things, you know, and they got a short list that they play, and everybody plays the same list, you know, unless you go to an alternative radio station or some small radio station or something like that where they specialize in a certain type of music, and that's kind of the best way you can go. It's hard to get out there and record today and make money. You know, you're really making the money off of the tours and stuff like that, you know.